Everything else about human biology is variable. We know that people are different. They differ in all sorts of ways. Why would we expect something like sleep to be identical from baby to baby? We know it's not identical from adult to adult.
Welcome, everyone, to Spoil Your Baby podcast. I am so excited today to have Dr. Helen Ball. Helen has just written an incredible new book called How Babies Sleep. You can pre-order it or order it today. So anyone who's ever felt safe bed sharing with their baby, or anyone who will feel safe bed sharing with their baby in the future, has Dr. Helen Ball to thank. She is a professor of anthropology and the director of the Durham Infancy and Sleep Center. And her research has been foundational in shaping the guidance and best practices we recommend to bed sharing families. Dr. Ball brings a holistic perspective to infant sleep, combining human biology with both biological and cultural anthropology, offering a lens that differs from traditional psychological and medical approaches. Dr. Ball, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a big privilege.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited about your new book. I know that you've been behind so many resources that we already have to support infant and family sleep, but this is, you've outdone yourself. The book is fantastic. I absolutely love it. We all need it.
Thank you. I took a bit of persuading to write it. It wasn't something that I ever imagined myself doing, but somebody persuaded me that it would be a fitting sort of closure to a long career, and so I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, me too. I think you just have such a unique perspective. You have so many unique sort of references at your fingertips that you draw on for your work. And it's really special to be able to pass that on to everyone. So I know what it's like to write a book. It is very, very big, very big project. So I'm so happy someone convinced you.
I enjoyed the process, actually. It was the nerves getting over the agreement to do it that was the issue. Once I'd started, it just poured out of my brain. It was so easy to write.
Yeah, I'm sure you knew exactly what you needed to say, which is very clear in the book. So let's start at the beginning. I think we all have a unique story, how we sort of got into the world of babies and mothers and fathers and the relationships there. Will you share with us your story? How did you get into this world?
Okay, well, it started for very practical reasons. I did my PhD in the United States at the University of Massachusetts, and I was a primatologist, and my field site was on an island off of the coast of Puerto Rico, which was relatively easy to get to up and down the east coast of the States. After I finished my PhD, I got a lectureship at Durham University in the UK, and I spent the first year that I was there trying to figure out how I was going to continue field work in Puerto Rico while I was living in the UK with a small child. My daughter was 1 when we moved to the UK. Oh, I moved back to the UK. My husband moved here for the first time. And I went back to Puerto Rico that first summer. We all did. And it was just such a different experience trying to go and do field work and leaving my daughter and husband behind all day, every day, that it just didn't feel sustainable anymore. So when we got back, I was thinking long and hard about what I could do using the skills that I'd got in the northeast of England. And I was already familiar with Jim McKenna's work on co-sleeping because I'd read it when I was pregnant with my daughter. Nobody in England at that time was doing any research like that. And I thought, well, he was trained as a primatologist. I'm trained as a primatologist. I can observe mothers and babies sleeping. That's what I'm going to do. I can do that here. So that was what I decided to do. And I knew mothers and babies because I had one. So it was, it seemed like a much more logical research area than continuing to try and study monkeys in the Caribbean. So that was how I did it.
And you shared in your book that you sort of pioneered some of that setup with your own baby. Was that your first daughter?
Yeah, that was my second daughter. So we started with some interview studies to find out what was happening in families at night and to see whether there was any bed sharing going on in the UK, which I anticipated that there would be, but everybody told me there wouldn't. But of course, people just kind of kept it to themselves. They didn't talk about it much. But when I asked them in that first study, it was clear that, a large proportion of families were bed sharing. So that was what made me have the confidence to then sort of start experimenting with videoing and everything. And my second daughter came along just at the right time to be our first guinea pig.
Beautiful. I love that. There's a lot of people now setting up cameras now the technology is really, really advanced.
We
right?
had big tripods with those big handheld camcorders on the top, and it was really cumbersome equipment. It got in everybody's way. We were trying to figure out how to stop people from falling over it in the middle of the night, and how to make sure it didn't get moved, and how to light it, because they didn't have like night vision cameras at that time. We had to have separate infrared lights on poles and mounted on headboards, and it was very makeshift.
Now it's so easy, right? You can get a little square, just stick it onto your camera.
Nobody even realizes it's there.
Yeah, I love how people show that now, right? Because, through your work and others, we understand it a lot better, right? By seeing it. Were you guys one of the first groups to video
I think
human mothers bed sharing?
I think we were the first to video them in their own homes. So the work that Jim had done with Sarah Moscow in California had been in the University of California Sleep Lab. So doing it at home, I think, was the novel thing, and finding out sort of what happened in everyday families in the middle of the night with their babies. Yeah.
So important. So thank you for everything in that realm. We're all benefiting from it now. So you also share in your book that your approach to infant sleep is really different than the approach taken by a lot of psychologists and medical doctors they've contributed to the literature as well. Will you tell us more about how you have a more unique perspective and a more holistic perspective looking at infant sleep?
Yeah, I think this comes from my anthropology training, both biological anthropology and cultural anthropology, really. The biological anthropology taught me to think about things in evolutionary time, to think about why, there are two levels of explanation for most behavioral and biological things that go on in the world. One is the proximate one, which is sort of what are the mechanisms, of course, that cause something to happen. And the other are the ultimate explanations. It's like, how did they evolve? Where did they come from? Why were they adaptive? Why do they still persist? And I think that ultimate sort of explanation of what human babies need, and why human babies are the way they are, and what parents should expect from human babies, I think is very different from the psychological perspective. Is much more mechanistic. It's about sort of thinking about how the brain works and how you can either modify how the brain works or how infants learn, or how you can train them to do certain things and not do other things. Or it thinks about sleep in terms of cognition in the long run, and sort of prioritizes or emphasizes the need for certain kinds of sleep, which I think from a biological perspective is the emphasis is a bit different. And then the kind of the clinical perspective, clinicians sometimes feel as though anthropologists shouldn't interfere in issues like infant sleep because we aren't trained medical professionals. But most of what I'm talking about isn't anything to do with medicine. It's to do with normal human behavior. And clinicians spend most of their time trying to fix abnormal issues, pathologies, clinical problems, not engaging with people who don't have any of those. So not engaging with sort of normal everyday behavior. That's what anthropologists study, normal everyday behavior of humans. So I think with a perfect discipline, really, to kind of stick our noses into things like infant sleep, because we're all about what humans do, how humans are, how humans behave when they're just living their everyday lives.
Yeah. I think that you just said the divide so clearly, right? And that last part of what you said was there's a group of people looking at what we see and observe as normal infant behavior, normal infant sleep, and mother baby sleep as a problem, like the wakings are a problem, the irregularity of their sleep is a problem. And then there's the other side, which can actually is sort of taking that curiosity standpoint of observing what is normal, right? And supporting that. Would you say that's right?
Yeah. What would you predict babies should want and need from sort of, their evolutionary history, our evolutionary history as mammals, as bipeds and as large-brained hominins and all of those things? They've sort of, that has shaped mother-baby behavior and biology over millennia. And you can work out what babies might expect. In Western society, we often try to downplay those things that babies expect, and clinicians sometimes overlook them because they're looking for anomalies rather than normality.
Yeah.
To me, that's been the whole debate around bed sharing. When I first started studying where babies sleep, to me, it made perfect sense that babies would sleep in contact with their mothers, because that's what every other mammal baby does. And we're mammals, and our babies need close contact. And
that's such a surprise to so many families.
But, and to so many clinicians that sort of wanted to say the opposite, that disagreed with me, it seemed to them somehow abnormal, unusual, pathological, wrong to bring babies into bed. But that is all recent cultural bias. It's not biology. So
yeah. And it's so confusing for parents, right? When they have that baby who's needing closeness to sleep, they know that, right? And then they're up against doctors or other health professionals who are sort of saying that's a problem or there's something wrong, right? It's a really, really confusing place for parents. So anyone who's confused, dive deeper into Helen's work and her book and all of her resources. Be so supportive for you. So yeah, I mean, this sort of ties into this idea that we have, in many Western countries where we have this sort of mythical good baby who sleeps independently from day one. They're alone in a crib for 12 hours overnight, plus several hours during the day for naps. They can just be put down drowsy and awake, fall asleep on their own, take care of themselves all night, self-soothe when they're distressed. So this is the baby that we see in commercial, diaper commercials and, all these places, TV shows. Tell us, you've already said a little bit about it, but tell us how babies are actually kind of designed to sleep, and how should babies sleep?
Well, there's a number of things that sort of affect the way in which babies sleep. And for me, the fundamental one is lactation. But human babies evolved in a context of human milk. That was the first, that's the oldest kind of like attribute that we have as mammals. And human milk is designed in a very particular way, or it's evolved to be in a very particular way, which is a kind of substance that you need to consume frequently because you digest it quickly, because it's mostly sugars and not a lot of fat. It doesn't satiate you for long periods. And that's the same for all species of mammals where babies are in contact with their mothers most of the time. And human babies are no different. Species that are adapted to be able to leave their babies for long period produce very different milk that's much higher in fat. And so, that's the first clue that you get, that human babies aren't going to sleep for long periods, and they aren't going to feel happy being left by themselves for long periods, because they need the person who provides them with nutrition to be nearby. And then the second thing is that person also has to provide them with warmth and safety, because humans don't make nests. They don't stash their babies in some kind of safe place. The person who's caring for them provides them with that safety and that warmth. So you would expect babies to seek that out, to try to bring their caregiver to them whenever they're separated. So, that to me is the function of crying when the baby's put down, is to get the caregiver to come back as quickly as possible, because that's the only way they've got to ensure their safety. And then we have to think about the fact that human babies brains are really undeveloped at birth. And so there's a number of things that they can't do at birth. They can't cling. They can't get up and walk. They can't follow, find their parents. So we have to take responsibility for keeping them close. They don't have a circadian rhythm. They don't have a day-night clock. So we shouldn't expect them to be able to sleep at night for longer than they sleep during the day. Human babies, most of their sleep time is spent, more of their sleep time is spent in REM sleep than it ever will be later on in their lives. REM sleep is a lighter stage of sleep that you're more easily aroused from. So babies are, again, more likely to wake up. They tend to wake up at kind of like the end of sleep cycles. They don't go into such deep sleep as their parents do. They don't spend as long in deep sleep. And their sleep needs are hugely variable. They vary from baby to baby, and they change over time. And so, we should be able, from knowing that, to predict that some babies might sleep more than others. Babies are going to wake their parents in the night. They're going to need to nap during the day. They're going to need to be fed in the middle of the night. All of these things, to me, are completely predictable based on what we know about baby biology.
Yeah. Yeah. And parents do expect their baby to sleep the same way as, other babies, and the whole sleep training kind of sleep industry tells parents that. Right? Your baby should sleep this prescriptive way. And that's not what we see.
Everything else about human biology is variable. We know that people are different. They differ in all sorts of ways. Why would we expect something like sleep to be identical from baby to baby? We know it's not identical from adult to adult. So, the idea that your baby should conform to some kind of average when it comes to sleep seems quite far-fetched to me.
Yeah. I love how you talk about as well, right, that in REM sleep and, through sleep, babies are building their brains and, building not 80% of their brain in that first 3 years. It always, takes me back to see how much people are controlling and trying to have, control and power over this physiological process that is so necessary to babies. I'm always like, please let babies have their sleep. They really, really need it. Right? That worries me quite a bit.
And let them do it their way. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely. And it is really localized, where we are trying to make baby sleep this problem that needs fixing, right? You also talk in your book about how you've, have studied sleep all over the world. Can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like all over the world and how it is actually in these pockets that we're trying to control it in these weird ways?
It's not exclusively Anglophone countries, places that speak English, but a lot of it is clustered around countries where people speak English, where these ideas have spread and taken hold. Outside of those areas, people have got much broader or more diverse, I suppose, ways of thinking about baby sleep. I have a PhD student who's in the Czech Republic, and they have only just started getting sleep coaches and sleep training introduced into the Czech Republic. And she's been talking to old ladies. She found she's doing ethnography in about toddler care, and she found a group of old ladies who met regularly in a library. And so she asked them if she could go and talk to them about attitudes in the Czech Republic to infant sleep. And they told her that what she was doing and what, her friends were doing in carrying their babies and sleeping with their babies is the way in which that's the traditional Czech way to kind of look after your baby. Particularly with toddlers, there's a concept that she talks about called uspavání, which is where parents lie down with their children in an evening to help them go to sleep. They're not put to bed and expected to go to sleep by themselves. It's sort of a soothing routine to help them calm down and fall asleep in the company of a parent. And that, that's very widespread across Eastern Europe. It's got slightly different names, but they've all got the same sort of root. But we've lost that idea, or we never had it. I don't know whether we ever had it, but that idea that the way in which children fall asleep most easily is in the company of somebody who makes them feel safe and secure and relaxed, is just completely different to the way in which we expect our small children to fall asleep. So, it's been really interesting, sort of the conversations that I've had with her. And then, in places like Japan and Korea, of course, the idea of separating babies for sleep sort of is counter to cultural notions around what a family is supposed to do. And a family is about bringing the child into the kind of, making the child part of that family. And you do that by sleeping together rather than separating them. So it's like the complete opposite of what we think about how separation is important. And that's the aim of parenting a child, is to get them to be independent and separate and stand on their own 2 feet.
Mm-hmm. Instead of, I love those goals, making them feel safe and protected and supported in those early years. Yeah, it's almost like, sharing that was coming up for me is it's almost like every aspect of the support for sleep is taken away, right? With sleep training, right? Including that falling asleep with the child, including the responding at night and all of it. There's so much to change. There really is. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about bed sharing a little bit. I think a lot of the parents listening will be bed sharing full-time or, part-time, right? As everyone does end up looking different. You've kind of talked about your experience with bed sharing and said it was one of the best decisions you ever made. I would also stand by that with my son. That was the best decision that we made. We still have lots of nights together. Can you tell us a little bit about the benefits of bed sharing for babies and parents?
So when we first started, I asked parents. I wanted to know what their motivation was for why they were bed sharing with their babies, and they had many. They didn't all have the same reason, but the strongest one, the one that always came up, was about breastfeeding, and that's an area where we've done a lot of research over the years, looking at what the relationship between bed sharing and breastfeeding actually means. And I can go into more detail about that if you want me to. In a nutshell, it both makes nighttime breastfeeding more convenient for the mom and sustains her milk supply, because when the baby's feeding frequently, you obviously keep producing more milk. And so one of the things that we found is that mums and babies who bed share are more likely to continue breastfeeding for longer. So the benefit there to the baby is that they get to be breastfed, for an extended period. And for the mom, it's that she's able to sustain breastfeeding. One of the difficulties that we have here, I don't know whether you have it in North America, is that women often stop breastfeeding quite quickly after they leave the hospital. And a lot of that, in my view, is driven by the idea that they have to put the baby in the cot and leave the baby in the cot for as long as possible and not pick the baby up, and make sure that they don't put the baby down drowsy but awake, or that they do put the baby down drowsy but awake. They don't let the baby fall asleep. To me, it's the most normal thing in the world for a baby to fall asleep while they're feeding. And so to feed in bed so that you can fall asleep safely is, really important. So the whole thing around breastfeeding, there's lots of stuff around breastfeeding and bed sharing that I think is beneficial for both babies and parents. But there's more than that. Parents also said that they bed shared with their babies because they wanted to monitor their baby. They wanted to be close to their baby so that they could respond to them quickly. They felt that it helped them to bond with their baby, and particularly if they'd been separated during the day, if they were past their maternity leave and they had gone back to work, sleeping with the baby was sort of this feel-good time where they could all cuddle up together. And dads also felt the same way about bed sharing. They didn't get to see their babies anywhere near as much as they wanted to, and having them close at night was really important to them. And, for some parents, it was more of an accident than a intentional practice when they first started. But they very quickly sort of figured out that it was a useful thing to do, that it helped them to calm their baby when they were distressed. It helped them to settle the baby. They got more sleep by bed sharing. So, babies feel more settled when they're close to their parents, and therefore they're less likely to disturb their sleep. It's there's loads of benefits to bed sharing.
Yeah, I always find the one of the hardest some of the hardest scenarios I come up when I'm working with people is people who are influenced by baby should be sleeping alone, but also to be responsive and to have the breastfeeding relationship. And then we have moms who are, tortured through the night, waking up, walking down the hall, breastfeeding, soothing, putting back in the bed, going back to their bed. And some people will do this for months, right? Without having the support. And they, bed sharing can be, I feel like it's like a right for people to access that completely from mothers to be rested. So I agree. The emotional benefits, the actual, everyone's getting the most rest, and the sleep cycles are different too, right? For the sleep quality is different for mothers and babies too, which is really fantastic. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Amazing. Well, this is so helpful, Helen. Before we say goodbye, I'm curious for the people listening, because, there are so many myths about bed sharing and fears people have and all this kind of stuff. Your book is a great resource for that, as well as your website, the BASIS website. Are those the places that you like to send parents? So if a parent is looking for sort of high quality, evidence-based guidelines for safe bed sharing, is that where you'd send them?
We do have some of that on the BASIS website. The other organisation, there's two organisations that I've worked with a lot in the UK, the Lullaby Trust and UNICEF Baby Friendly. Both of them use the sort of findings of our research to inform the information that they give to parents. So Lullaby Trust has some safe asleep literature and a very nice website that's just been redesigned that give parents, they're a infant death prevention charity, a SIDS charity. So their emphasis is on making sleep as safe as possible. But they acknowledge that we bed share, that, most of us bed share. And that took a while for them to sort of come to accept that. That was sort of one of the missions that I was on as a researcher after I had done those initial studies and found out just how many families were bed sharing. I felt like it was really important to persuade those organizations that said just never bed share, that actually, they were doing harm with that message, because that it was undermining people's ability to breastfeed and to look after their babies in the middle of the night, etc. But also that it was unsafe to not inform people about how to bed share as safely as they could, given that we know the vast majority of us will do it at some point. So the Lullaby Trust has produced really nice materials for anybody who has a baby, really, because it's not targeted at people who think they might bed share. It's targeted at all parents in the anticipation that bed sharing can happen, whether they intend to or not, and that they need to know what makes it dangerous and how to avoid that. So the UNICEF guidance, which is called Caring for Your Baby at Night, is really targeted towards breastfeeding mums because they're a breastfeeding support organisation. So that's more about kind of like how breastfeeding and bed sharing work together, and what mums need to think about if they're going to do this on a kind of regular basis, and both from the breastfeeding side and from the bed sharing side. But I think both
That's wonderful.
Both sets of information sort of fill an important niche.
Yeah, I completely agree that every family needs to know how to bed share safely, whether they plan to or not, just by the numbers, right? You have those numbers in your book, right? The amount of families that will bring their baby into their bed under 6 months, the statistics are showing us it's very likely that every family will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if we say do not do it, then people are going to the most dangerous places. They're going to the recliners, they're going to the couches.
Yeah.
And we got to stop that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that advocacy there, because I've been watching those all the kind of places that are putting out guidelines for the past decade or so. And there's been a big change. There's a province in Canada, British Columbia has now taken this into account. And yes, the UK, you're doing most of your advocacy there. So that's the leader.
Check out the for practitioners, check out the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine as well. They've got 2 really nice protocols, one about bed sharing and breastfeeding, and one about physiologic infant care. And it's exactly aligned, and it's that there for people around the world. They've really tried to make the information that they share sort of global, so that people can use it wherever they are. But I think they've looked at the evidence, they've ranked the evidence, they've come to conclusions about what is and isn't, what clinicians can and can't recommend. And it's eye-opening for a lot of people in a few countries.
Yeah, it's so important. I feel like this work is really freeing mothers to be as rested as they can, to be as close to their babies as they want to, and just giving us that support, right? That research that we've looked at it, and we're doing the best that we can, because that's what everyone's looking for.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Helen. Is there one idea you want to send out there to all the mothers and fathers and professionals out there listening as we say goodbye?
I think the thing that, we've talked a lot about bed sharing, so I'll talk a bit about sort of the way in which babies sleep. And I think one of the things that's been really important for me to think about over the last decade or so, as I've thought more about sort of what typical baby sleep looks like, is the idea of sleep pressure. And it's not something that I heard being talked about in the infant sleep world, all those years ago when I first started. It's only come kind of like recently become, it's not prominent, it's still not prominent, but it's only recently become acknowledged. And I think if parents can grasp the concept of sleep pressure and how it works, it can alleviate an awful lot of frustration that they feel when they're trying to manage their baby's sleep. Because we're often trying to put babies down before their sleep pressure's high enough. And we're often trying to make babies sleep for long periods in the day, which interferes with the buildup of sleep pressure towards the night. And there's so many things that you can learn about how to think about supporting your baby's sleep rather than fighting with your baby's sleep biology, if we understand sleep pressure. So, yeah, that's something that I would like more people to understand, is how the buildup of sleep pressure works and why fixed bedtimes and long daytime naps are counterintuitive to that, or counterproductive to that.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest changes I make with people in sleep consults, is getting babies out of the dark for naps, out of the, like, sort of getting them to have daytime sleep during the day, not try to mimic nighttime sleep during the day.
Nighttime sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah. And once those babies start to have daytime nap architecture versus nighttime nap architecture, their nights look a lot better. That's big tip for parents.
And their moms can get out of the house. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was talking to my sister-in-law the other day, and she said she has a little one, and she's hanging out with other moms and babies, and they're like, look at their time. Everyone has the same sleep schedule. And they're like, oh, it's this time. Everyone out. We're gone. And she's like, what is going on? Why? Like, can't we just put on our carriers and just go for a walk together?
We're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, she's living her life, but everyone around her is
a different mindset. And I think it takes people a bit of getting used to, but it's so liberating.
Yes, absolutely. For both the babies and the moms. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Helen. I'm so happy we got to sit down together and do this. I'll be sharing your book in all the places. Everyone interested, go ahead. You could pre-order it now, and it may, it's coming out. Is it coming out May 27th in
May 27th
North America?
In North America, May 29th in the UK. You get it first.
Amazing. Wow, we're lucky. Lucky.
They just have different publishing schedules, so yeah.
Incredible. Well, thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for all you do. Take care.
Thank you.